Much like the 300 Spartans who defended Thermopylae, Texas's independence would come to a pivotal point, and the defenders of the Alamo would make history not only for their state, but for their country, and leave a lasting impression on the world about the power of patriotism and bravery. The Battle of the Alamo in 1836 wasn't any ordinary battle. It was a turning point and a motivator for those striving for Texas's sovereignty, and a historical gem in the illustrious history of the United States. Being a born Texan and having studied Texas history since the age of 9, I believe I can recount these events for you with a certain level of accuracy. The month of March, some 181 years ago, the Battle of the Alamo took place. As we, the United States, realize that history is something that ought not to be forgotten, with the recognition of Black History Month and Women's History Month, holidays such as Labor Day and Memorial Day, we realize that history is a part of who we are as a country and a people. And we acknowledge that history teaches us a lesson. And few lessons learned are more important than those learned at the Alamo. The story of the Alamo begins with the establishment of the mission San Francisco de Solano near the Rio Grande River in 1700. There, Father Antonio San Buenavierta y Olivares worked to convert many of the Coahuiltecan Native American bands to Catholicism, the official religion of Spain. Eventually, this area being turned into multiple military garrisons throughout the Texas independence. After Olivares traveled to Texas with an expedition in 1709, he was struck by the potential of the San Antonio area and later recommended it to the Spanish Viceroy, Marquis de Valero, as a site for the mission waypoint on the road to Spanish settlements in East Texas. In 1718, after many Indians had left the mission Solano, Olivares moved the mission's belongings to the new site near present-day San Antonio. He named the new mission in honor of Saint Anthony de Padilla and the Spanish viceroy who had approved his plan, San Antonio de Valero. The mission changed locations several times, but the present location was chosen in 1724. The foundation of the stone mission church was laid in 1744 until it was secularized 70 years later. 70 years later, San Antonio de Valero was home to Spanish missionaries and their Indian converts. A Spanish mission was more than a religious institution. Its purpose was to take an indigenous population and convert it to not only convert it to Catholicism, but the Spanish way of life, much like the United States' attempt to eradicate Native American culture. In establishing the missions in Texas, the Spanish hoped to create a self-sufficient population that would continue to exist and grow under Spanish as loyal Spanish subjects, thereby staving off any involvement of foreign powers like France. Indian converts were taught farming, raising livestock, blacksmithing, carpentry, stonework, and weaving. Indians and missionaries at San Antonio de Valero also found protection at the mission. Encroachment by warlike Apaches from the west and Comanches from the north meant local Coahuiltecan tribes were under constant threat. The former mission, with its convento, adobe houses, and incomplete stone church, would soon play host to the first of many military garrisons. By the late 1700s, much had changed on the Texas frontier. Indian convert populations had dwindled at most of the Spanish missions, sometimes in increased mortality due to exposure to new diseases carried by the Europeans. The rich mission lands cultivated over a century were also coveted by local populations, and as a result, in 1793, Mission San Antonio de Valero was secularized and control passed to local authorities. Much of the mission's lands and goods were distributed amongst the Spanish locals and remaining Indian residents. The other San Antonio missions would meet a similar fate. The establishment of the mission San Francisco de Solano Father Olivares' work to convert the Coahuiltecan bands to Catholicism and the mission becoming a military garrison were all steps along the timeline that contributed to the events of the Alamo coming to be. The next big factor of the Battle of the Alamo was Texas's fight for independence from Mexico. San Antonio de Bejar had long been an important place in Texas. Not only was it home to a military garrison, it was a crossroads and a center of commerce. On the road to independence, San Antonio saw two battles and sieges. The Washington on the Bravos Convention of the Texas government declared its sovereignty, and unbeknownst to the Alamo defenders of their state's declaration, these brave Texans still chose to stay and defend their post. The two sieges and battles during the Texas Revolutions happened at San Antonio. The first, the siege and battle of Bejar, began in October 1835, a bloody 5-day house-to-house fight in which Texians took control of the town, and Mexican General Martin Perfecto de Cas surrendered the town and the public property it held. Thus, the rebels gained control of San Antonio and the Alamo. On February 23, 1836, after a grueling winter march, General Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna and his army arrived at San Antonio to put down the frontier rebellion. The Texian rebels withdrew across the San Antonio River into the safety of the old fortified mission known as the Alamo. While the Alamo was under siege, the provisional Texas government organized at the convention named Washington on the Bravos. On March 2nd, the convention declared independence, and the Republic of Texas was born, at least on paper. As Mexican forces surrounded the Alamo, Santa Anna raised the red flag, indicating that no quarter would be given to the traitors inside the mission. The Alamo commander, William Barrett Travis, began writing desperate pleas for help, including his famous victory or death letter sent on February 24th of that year. While they were unaware that Texas had declared its independence, the roughly 200 Alamo defenders stayed at their posts waiting on help from the settlements. Among them were lawyers, doctors, farmers, a former congressman, and famous frontiersman from Tennessee named Davy Crockett. There was a legendary knife fighter and land speculator, James Bowie, who was in command before falling ill and sharing duties with Travis. Several women and children were inside the Alamo, including 15-month-old Angela Dickinson. Vastly outnumbered, these 200 defenders were scared. They were looking for a reason to leave or a way out. The young Texas Colonel Travis, only 26, was a lawyer and not a professional military man, but he knew enough history to understand that in a siege, the army on the outside usually prevails over the army on the inside. Travis would give a rousing speech to his troops, drawing a line in the dirt, daring anyone under his command to join him in certain death to protect the Alamo. This is actually where we get the famous saying, "Draw a line in the sand." Just before the final battle, Travis placed his ring around the infant Angela Dickinson's neck, knowing she would likely be spared. And one of the last messages from the Alamo was a note he left with her, asking his friends to take care of his young son, Charles. While the youngest of the defenders was 16 and the oldest was Gordon C. Jennings, age 56, most of the defenders were in their 20s. Most were Anglo, but a handful of them were Tejano defenders. The defenders of the Alamo held out courageously for 13 days before the Mexican invaders finally overpowered them. In the pre-dawn of March 6, Santa Anna's forces breached the walls and killed every Texas combatant. Travis raced to the north wall, but was soon killed. Bowie was most likely killed in bed because of his illness. And while reports differ as to Crockett's death, many believe Davy Crockett survived the initial attack, but was put to death by Mexican soldiers soon afterward. Mexican soldiers breached the north wall and flooded into the compound, The fierce battle centered around the old church, where defenders made a last stand. The battle lasted about 90 minutes. For Texans, the Battle of the Alamo became a symbol of their heroic resistance to oppression and their struggle for independence, which they won later that year. The Battle of the Alamo, being a motivator, turned the tide against the Mexicans in Texas's strive for independence, which, with the help of the United States, they gained. And upon the signing of the Treaty of Velasco on May 14, 1836, just a few months later, the revolution was over and the Republic of Texas began in earnest. For the Texans, the Battle of the Alamo became an enduring symbol of heroic resistance to oppression. Their struggle for independence, which they won, will forever be in their minds, which is why we, as Texans, say, remember the Alamo. This has been an account of the battle, its outcomes, events, knowing about the mission, Texas' strive for sovereignty, and the battle itself. I believe you to be better students of history. I believe that you have learned something from this. Being a student of history is important. In the famous words of Edmund Burke, those who do not know history are destined to repeat it.